Let's start with opening statements. You will each receive 1 minute. Mayor Bill de Blasio, please begin.
To the working people of America, tonight I bring you a message of hope. We can make change in this country. I know from personal experience it can be done. When I became the mayor of the nation's largest city, I set us on a path of bold change. They said it couldn't be done, but we gave pre-K to every child for free. We got rid of stop and frisk, and we lowered crime. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Yes, it can be done. Now, tonight, we have to get to the heart and soul of who we are as Democrats. There are good people on this stage, but there are real differences. Joe Biden told wealthy donors that nothing fundamentally would change if he were president. Kamala Harris said she's not trying to restructure society. Well, I am. For 40 years, working people have taken it on the chin in this country. For 40 years, the rich have gotten richer, and they paid less and less in taxes. It cannot go on this way. When I'm president, we will even up the score, and we will tax the hell out of the wealthy to make this a fairer country and to make sure it's a country that puts working people first.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Senator Michael Bennet.
Thank you. Last week, I saw one of those Trump signs that says, America, love it or leave it. And it was on the outside of a church. I love America, and I know we can make it better. Before coming to the Senate, I ran a large urban school district where most of the kids live in poverty. Those kids have exactly the same hopes that I had. Their parents have exactly the same hopes for them that my parents had for me, and that Susan and I have for our 3 children. But for the last 3 years, we've been consumed by a president who frankly doesn't give a damn about your kids or mine. Mr. President, kids belong in classrooms, not cages. And they deserve something better than a bully in the White House. Let's end this 3-ring circus in Washington. And let's make this election about reclaiming our future for our kids and our democracy. Empty promises won't beat Donald Trump. I can.
Governor Jay Inslee.
Good evening. I'm Jay Inslee. I am running for president because the people in this room and the Democrats watching tonight are the last best hope for humanity on this planet. If we make defeating the climate crisis the top priority of the United States, we will have a fighting chance to save ourselves and our children's future. It has to be our top priority. My plan is one of national mobilization, quickly bringing 100% clean energy to Americans, creating 8 million good union jobs. This is a big, bold, ambitious plan for clean energy for a big, bold, ambitious nation. Middle ground approaches are not enough. We must confront the fossil fuel industry. I've been working on this for 25 years, and now we know this. We are at a tipping point, and whether we shrink from this challenge or rise to it is the vital question of our time. We Democrats believe we can still do big things in this nation. We can defeat the climate crisis. Let's get to work.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
My grandmother taught me that nothing's impossible. She spent 2 generations organizing women in upstate New York. My mother taught me nothing's impossible. She was one of only 3 women in her law school class and worked with gay couples for basic rights. If you want to get something done, just tell me it's impossible. As a freshman senator, I was told you couldn't repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Even members of my own party told me it wasn't convenient. When are civil rights ever convenient? We stood up to the Pentagon and we got it done. Not impossible. 10 years ago, I was told You couldn't pass health care for our 9/11 first responders, those heroes who raced up the towers when others were coming down. Even when Congress turned its back on them, we kept fighting. Just last week, we made the 9/11 health bill permanent. Beating Donald Trump, definitely not impossible. We need a nominee who will take on the big fights and win. We need a nominee who doesn't know the meaning of impossible.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
I love our country. It's why I enlisted after 9/11. Why I've served as a soldier for over 16 years, deployed twice to the Middle East, and serve in Congress now for almost 7 years. I know what patriotism is, and I've known many great patriots throughout my life. And let me tell you this, Donald Trump is not behaving like a patriot. As president, I will bring this spirit of real patriotism to the White House, serving the interests of all Americans, not just the rich and powerful. I'll fight for our rights and freedoms of all Americans, upholding these principles in our Constitution upon which our country was founded. Fighting for justice and equality for all. Fighting for every single American, regardless of race or religion, as we strive towards that more perfect union. And as president, I'll bring this unifying spirit of love for country and the soldiers' values of service above self to the White House, truly leading a government of, by, and for the people.
Secretary Julian Castro.
Thank you, Dana, and good evening. You know, just a few days ago, we were reminded and inspired by our fellow Americans in Puerto Rico that public service is not fundamentally about any of us. It's about you and your family. I want you to know that if I'm elected president, that I will work hard every single day so that you and your family can have good health care when you need it, so that your children and grandchildren can get a good education, so that they can reach their dreams, and that you can have good job opportunities, whether you live here in a big city like Detroit or in a small town in our country. I know we have a wonderful, special nation, but that too many people are struggling. And I know what that's like too. You know, I grew up with a single mom in a poor neighborhood. But like many of you, I don't want to make America anything again. I don't want us to go backward. We're not going back to the past. We're not going back where we came from. We're going to move forward. We're going to make America better than it's ever been in the years to come. Let's do that together.
Andrew Yang.
If you've heard anything about me and my campaign, you've heard that someone is running for president who wants to give every American $1,000 a month. I know this may sound like a gimmick, but this is a deeply American idea, from Thomas Paine to Martin Luther King to today. Let me tell you why we need to do it and how we pay for it. Why do we need to do it? We already automated away millions of manufacturing jobs, and chances are your job could be next. If you don't believe me, just ask an auto worker here in Detroit. How do we pay for it? Raise your hand in the crowd if you've seen stores closing where you live. It is not just you. Amazon is closing 30% of America's stores and malls and paying zero in taxes while doing it. We need to do the opposite of much of what we're doing right now, and the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. So let me share the math. $1,000 a month for every adult would be $461 million every month right here in Detroit alone. The automation of our jobs is the central challenge facing us today. It is why Donald Trump is our president, and any politician not addressing it is failing the American people.
Senator Cory Booker.
Thank you, Dana. Last week, the President of the United States attacked an American city, calling it a disgusting, rat-infested, rodent mess. We need a nation that understands that these tired, old language,
Stand by, Senator.
I will stand by.
Please stand by.
Please continue, Senator. Thank you very much. Donald Trump, from Charleston to Baltimore to even the border, is using the tired old language of demagogues, of fearmongers, of racists to try to divide our country against itself. We know who Donald Trump is, but in this election, the question is, who are we as a people? We have serious problems in America. We have deep wounds and seriously, deeply rooted challenges. We desperately need to heal as a nation and move forward. Because we know in this country that our fates are united, that we have a common destiny. The call of this election is the call to unite in common cause and common purpose. That's how we will beat Donald Trump. That's how I will beat Donald Trump. And as your president, that's how I will govern and move us forward together.
Senator Kamala Harris.
This is an inflection moment in the history of our country. I think we all know that. This is a moment in time that is requiring us each as individuals and collectively to look in a mirror and ask a question. That question being, who are we? And I think most of us know that part of the answer to that question is we are better than this. So this then becomes a moment that we must fight for the best of who we are. And fight, of course, we will. And this is not a new fight for us as Americans. We have always been prepared to fight for our ideals. We have always been a nation that fights for the best of who we are. And I'll tell you, I come from fighters. My parents met when they were active in the civil rights movement. My sister Maya and I joke, we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. And I am prepared to march with you, to fight with you for the best of who we are and to successfully prosecute the case of 4 more years of Donald Trump and against him.
Vice President Joe Biden.
Tonight, I think Democrats are expecting some engagement here, and I expect we'll get it. I'm running for president to restore the soul of this country. You know, we have a president, as everybody's acknowledged here, every day is ripping at the social fabric of this country. But no one man has the capacity to rip that apart. It's too strong. We're too good. Just look at this stage, made up of very diverse people from diverse backgrounds. Went on to be mayors, senators, governors, congresswomen, members of the cabinet, and yes, even a vice president. Mr. President, this is America. And we are strong and great because of this diversity, Mr. President, not in spite of it, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, let's get something straight. We love it. We are not leaving it. We are here to stay, and we're certainly not going to leave it to you.
Thank you, Vice President Biden. I want to start the debate with one of the top priorities for Democratic voters, and that is health care. Senator Harris, this week you released a new health care plan, which would preserve private insurance and take 10 years to phase in. Vice President Biden's campaign calls your plan, quote, a have it every which way approach, and says it's just part of a confusing pattern of equivocating about your health care stance. What do you say to that?
Well, they're probably confused because they've not read it. But the reality is that I have been spending time in this campaign listening to American families, listening to experts, listening to healthcare providers. And what I came away with is a very clear understanding that I needed to create a plan that was responsive to the needs of the American people, responsive to their needs, understanding that insurance companies have been jacking up the prices for far too long, that American families have to be held down by deductibles and co-pays and premiums that can cause them bankruptcy. I listened to the American families who said 4 years is just not enough to transition into this new plan, so I devised a plan where it's going to be 10 years of a transition. I listened to American families who said, I want an option that will be under your Medicare system that allows a private plan. So I designed a plan where, yes, responsive to the needs of American families, there will be a public plan under my plan for Medicare and a private plan under my plan for Medicare. Because the bottom line is this: we must agree that access to health care must be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And in America today, far too many people, in fact, 30 million people, are going without access to health care.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Biden, your response.
Well, my response is that the senators had several plans so far. And anytime someone tells you you're going to get something good in 10 years, you should wonder why it takes 10 years. If you notice, there's no talk about the fact that the plan in 10 years will cost $3 trillion. You will lose your employer-based insurance. And in fact, you know, this is the single most important issue facing the public. And to be very blunt and to be very straightforward, you can't beat President Trump with double talk on this plan.
Your response, Senator Harris?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Vice President Biden, you're just simply inaccurate in what you're describing. The reality is that our plan will bring health care to all Americans under a Medicare for All system. Our plan will allow people to start signing up on the first day. Babies will be born into our plan, and right now 4 million babies almost are born every day in America, or every year in America. Under our plan, we will ensure that everyone has access to health care. Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans. So I think that you should really think about what you're saying, but be reflective and understand that the people of America want access to health care and do not want cost to be their barrier to getting it.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, your response?
The plan, no matter how you cut it, costs $3 trillion when it is in fact employed. Number one, 10 years from now, after 2 terms of the senator being president, after her time. Secondly, it will require middle-class taxes to go up, not down. Thirdly, it will eliminate employer-based insurance. And fourthly, what happens in the meantime?
I'd like to respond. First of all, the cost of doing nothing is far too expensive. Second, we are now paying $3 trillion a year for health care in America. Over the next 10 years, it's probably going to be $6 trillion. We must act. My plan is about immediately allowing people to sign up and get into coverage. Right now in America, we have seniors who every day, millions of seniors, are going into the Medicare system. And they are getting full coverage and the kind of coverage they need. All people should have access to health care, and cost should not be their barrier.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Mayor de Blasio, let's bring you in here. What's your response?
Thank you. I don't know what the Vice President and Senator are talking about. The folks I talk to about health insurance say that their health insurance isn't working for them. There's tens of millions of Americans who don't even have health insurance, tens of millions more who have health insurance they can barely make work because of the copays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses. There's this mythology that somehow all these folks are in love with their insurance in America. What I hear from union members and from hardworking middle-class people is they wish they had better insurance. And they're angry at private insurance companies that skim all the profits off the top and make it impossible for everyday people to get coverage like mental health care, dental care, the things that would be full coverage for all Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Vice President Biden, you just heard Mayor de Blasio. He said in the past that Democrats who want to keep the private insurance industry are defending a health care system that is not working. What's your response?
My response is Obamacare is working. The way to build this and get to it immediately is to build on Obamacare. Go back and take back all the things that Trump took away, provide a public option, meaning every single person in America would be able to buy another option if they didn't like their employer plan, or if they're on Medicaid, they'd automatically be in the plan. It would take place immediately, it would move quickly, and it would ensure the vast majority of Americans. In the meantime, what happens? Did anybody tell you how much their plans cost? My plan cost $750 billion. That's what it costs, not $30 trillion.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senator Gillibrand, you support Medicare for All. How do you feel about Senator Harris continuing to call her health proposal Medicare for All when it includes a far more significant role for private insurance than the bill you co-sponsored?
I think for the viewers in the audience right now, they're at risk of losing the forest through the trees. Because the truth is, healthcare in America should be a right. When I was a young mother and had Theo as an infant, he had an allergic reaction to eggs and his whole body turned red and puffy. I had to rush him to the emergency room. My heart is palpitating because I'm worried that his throat will close. I am not worried about not having an insurance card or a credit card in my wallet. I know whatever they're going to prescribe, whether it's an EpiPen or an inhaler, I can afford it. The truth about healthcare in America today is people can't afford it. They cannot afford it. And the insurance companies, for these plans that rely on insurance companies, I'm sorry, they're for-profit companies. They have an obligation to their shareholders. They pay their CEO millions of dollars. They have to have quarterly profits. They have fat in the system that's real, and it should be going to healthcare. So let's not lose the forest for the trees. And last, let's not forget what the Republicans are doing. Because the truth is, the Republicans and Trump, their whole goal is to take away your health care.
Thank you.
To make it harder for you to afford it, even if you have pre-existing conditions.
Senator Harris, your response.
In response to Senator Biden about the Affordable Care Act, it is important that you understand that our Medicare for All plan has actually, by the architect of the Obama Affordable Care Act, been described as one of the most effective ways to bring health care to all. Kathleen Sebelius has endorsed our plan as being something that will get us to where we need to go. In terms of the point that Senator Gillibrand is raising, I couldn't agree more. Senator Biden, your plan will keep and allow insurance companies to remain with status quo, doing business as usual. And that's going to be about jacking up copays, jacking up deductibles. It will still be the situation that people going to an emergency room have to come out $5,000.
My plan makes the limit of copay to be $1,000 because we further support the ability to buy into the Obamacare plan. Secondly, the idea that this is somehow a bad idea. No one has to keep their private insurance. But if they would like their insurance, they should be able to keep it. Nothing is demanded in my plan that there be private insurance. It says if the 160 million people who have it say they like their employer insurance, they should have a right to have it. If they don't, they can buy into the Biden plan, which is Obamacare.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. Senator Booker, let me bring you in here. You say you support Medicare for all. You also say you are not going to pull private health insurance from more than 150 million Americans in exchange for a government plan. But that's what Medicare for all would do. So how do you square that?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the person that's enjoying this debate most right now is Donald Trump, as we pit Democrats against each other, while he is working right now to take away Americans' health care. There's a court case working through the system that's going to gut the Affordable Care Act and actually gut protections on pre-existing conditions. And so I was raised by two civil rights parents who told me to always keep your eyes on the prize. And that is that in the United States of America, every Democrat should stand with the belief that everyone should have access to health care, that it's a human right. And how we get there, it has to be to end this broken system, because we are on our way in just a handful of years of literally spending 20% of our economy, one out of every $5 spent on health care. And we spend more than every other nation on everything from MRIs to insulin drugs, multiple more than other countries. And so you want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work to get us to a point where Medicare for all, where everyone is covered. But this pitting against progressives, against moderates, saying one is unrealistic and the other doesn't care enough, that to me is dividing our party and demoralizing us in face of the real enemy here.
Thank you,
I'm going to keep fighting for that enemy.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Congressman Gabbard, what's your response?
The reality is right now we don't have a health care system. We have a sick care system, and there are far too many people in this country who are sick and unable to get the care that they need because they cannot afford it. So at the core of this problem is the fact that big insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies who've been profiting off the backs of sick people have had a seat at the table writing this legislation. Now, Kamala Harris just talked about Kathleen Sebelius, who helped write her bill. This just pointed to the fatal flaw in her proposal. Sebelius works for Medicare Advantage, private insurance company who will stand to profit under her plan. If we're seeking to really reform our healthcare system, we've got to shut out big insurance and big pharma out of the drafting process so they cannot continue to profit off the backs of the sick people in this country who are searching and in desperate need of care.
Senator Harris, your response?
Well, unfortunately, Representative Gabbard got it wrong. Kathleen Sebelius did not write my plan. She endorsed it as being one of the plans that is the best to get us to a place where everyone is going to have access to health care in America. And when we talk about this again, I'm going to go back to Vice President Biden, because your plan does not cover everyone in America by your staff's and your own definition. 10 million people, as many as 10 million people, will not have access to health care. And in 2019 in America, for a Democrat to be running for president with a plan that does not cover everyone, I think is without excuse. Our plan covers everyone and gives people choice.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden, your response.
My plan will cover everyone, number one. Number two, the fact is that my plan also calls for controlling drug prices. The biopharma is now where things are going to go. It's no longer chemicals. It's about all these breakthroughs we have with dealing with the whole, immune system. And what we have to do now is we have to have a form that sits in the HHS and says, as you develop a drug, you got to come to us and decide what you can sell it for. We will set the price. And secondly, it says that you cannot raise that price beyond the cost of inflation from this point on.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I want to bring in Senator Bennett. Last night on this stage, one of your Democratic rivals suggested that running on Medicare for All would get Donald Trump reelected. Do you agree with that, sir?
I agree that it makes it much more likely. Unlike others on this stage, I've been crystal clear where I've been for a decade through 2 tough races in Colorado. I believe we should finish the job we started with the Affordable Care Act, with a public option that gives everybody in this audience the chance to pick for their family whether they want private insurance or public insurance. It requires the drug companies to be negotiated with by Medicare, and it provides competition. That is totally different from the plan that Senator Warren and Senator Sanders and Senator Harris have proposed, which would make illegal employer-based health insurance in this country and massively raise taxes on the middle class to the tune of $30 trillion, as Joe Biden said. We don't need to do that. It doesn't make sense for us to take away insurance from half the people in this room and put huge taxes on almost everybody in this room when we can pass a public option, trust the American people to make the right decision, and have universal health care in this country in 2 years, not 10 years.
Secretary Castro, I want to bring you in.
I need to respond.
Your response. I'll come to you right after Secretary Castro. Secretary Castro.
Well, I know that this is something very personal for all Americans. You know, I grew up with a grandmother that had diabetes, and I watched as her condition got worse and worse. That whole time, she had Medicare. I want to strengthen Medicare for the people who are on it and then expand it to anybody who wants it. I also believe, though, that if somebody has a private health insurance plan that is strong, that they want to hold on to, that they should be able to do that. What I don't believe is that the profit motive of big pharma or big insurance companies should ever determine in our great nation whether somebody gets health care or not.
Thank you, Secretary Castro. Senator Harris, Senator Bennett had suggested that you support banning employer-based health insurance. Is that true?
Well, first of all, with all due respect to my friend Michael Bennett, my plan does not offer anything that is illegal. What it does is it separates the employer from health care, meaning that where you work will not be the kind of health care you get will not be a function of where you work. I have met so many Americans who stick to a job that they do not like, where they are not prospering, simply because they need the health care that that employer provides. It's time that we separate employers from the kind of health care people get, and under my plan, we do that. As it relates to the insurance and the pharmaceutical companies, who will not be called in and who will not be taken to task by Senator Biden or Senator Bennett's plan, we will do that.
Senator Bennett, I want to bring you back.
Senator Harris is my friend as well, but I have to say, if we can't admit tonight what's in the plan, which is banning employer-based insurance, we're not going to be able to admit that when Donald Trump is accusing Democrats of doing that as well. We need to be honest about what's in this plan. It bans employer-based insurance and taxes the middle class to the tune of $30 trillion. Do you know how much that is? That is 70% of what the government will collect in taxes over the next 10 years. We don't need to do that.
Governor, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I do want to
health care in this country.
I do want to bring in Senator Harris because he just suggested you were not being honest.
We cannot keep with the Republican talking points on this. You got to stop. The reality is that under my Medicare for All plan, yes, employers are not going to be able to dictate the kind of health care that their employees get. They will be able to make that decision. Private insurance companies and private carriers, if they comply by our rules and play by our rules, will be able to offer those employees health care coverage under a private Medicare plan, or they can have the option of a public Medicare plan. But it is misleading to suggest that employees want what their employer is offering only. They want choice, and my plan gives that to them.
Thank you, Senator.